What do you mean, who's been cancelled?
Well, it's a word you use a lot. You say that James O'Brien won't be cancelled because he's got such a big platform.
Well, you have. You're not going to get cancelled. Well,
So
what
who
about?
has been?
I can't remember the name of the author who got cancelled by
You're
the
going to have to do better than that, because you say James O'Brien will not be cancelled, but I know loads of people who have been. So just name a few.
Okay, well, I can think of one immediately, which is a good example. And actually, you ought to be furious.
This is one of those debates I knew was going to get heated the moment I saw Piers Morgan sitting across from James O'Brien. If you've followed British media for any length of time, you already know these two rarely see the world the same way. And today, they're taking on one of the most explosive words in modern politics, woke. Now here's the interesting part. Poll after poll in both the UK and the US has shown that a lot of people have heard the word woke, but many can't even agree on what it actually means. That's exactly why these culture war debates never seem to end. Piers believes the movement has gone too far, that people are becoming afraid to speak openly because of cancel culture and public backlash. James, he thinks much of that panic has been exaggerated by media outlets that know outrage keeps audiences watching. And trust me, these two don't waste any time. James comes armed with questions. Piers comes armed with examples. Neither is interested in giving the other an easy win. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. All right, let's see who actually makes the stronger case.
I think you see them, and it's never quite clear how far into your cheek your tongue is when you're talking about things like vegan sausage rolls. But you do see them as a genuine threat. I wonder what they're a threat to.
I see it as a genuine threat to freedom of speech. Because I think that there's a...
You're calling for them to be quiet.
Well, look, first of all, by the original definition of woke,
yes,
I would happily sign up to being woke. If woke means just being aware to social and racial injustice, then I'm woke. That's not a problem. But that's not what the modern version of woke has become. It's become a very destructive, quite self-harming sort of feeding frenzy based around this cancel culture. And I know you don't really buy into that, but I see it all the time where people are getting more and more cowed about feeling they just can't express an opinion or have a haircut or wear certain culturally inappropriate outfits or, laugh at a certain...
But are they really?
Whatever it may be. And I feel it's self-harming. I don't feel that taking things to that degree brings anybody with you. And if you want to win an argument, you've got to bring people with you.
But the argument for me... And trans is an exception to this observation, because I think that trans issues are very confusing and people scream at each other with a fury of certainty that I can't achieve anything like that level.
Do you think that applies to everything?
No, I really don't. I think trans is very much the exception, and in fact, it's people who are possessed of really toxic and dangerous views regarding race or religion or ethnicity or sexuality. I think they're desperate for trans to be front and center, because then they can claim there's a culture war. But actually, a lot of your arguments work in the context of trans. They don't work in the context of racism or religious bigotry.
Well, they do if you start making a mockery.
Well, that's what I'm coming to. Yes, but that's what I don't get, because all I know of these great battles are what I'm told by media outlets that are literally primed to infuriate and enrage me. And I
followed you on that. And what I would say to you is, you think that they're sort of conflated, they're concocted, they're created by the media, but it wasn't the media that said, for example, that Rule Britannia should be chopped from the prawns. It was actually, the catalyst was not the media. It got brought to the media's attention, and the media then had a lot of, hey, while the sun shone. But I do think it's chicken and the egg, isn't it? There's always something there that starts the...
Okay, so name 3 people who, in the public eye, who passionately believe that we shouldn't have sung Land of Hope and Glory at the... And remember, it's an audience sing-along at an event with no audience.
No, sure. Doesn't need to be 3. It just needs to be the person in charge of the production.
Well, no, you're talking about an army of wokies, and I can't think of one person who passionately believed it shouldn't happen.
This person had the power to decide it wasn't going to be a big part of the proms, and then that became a catalyst.
But there was no audience, Piers.
But here's the point I would make to you.
An audience sing-along at an event with no audience.
Then bring somebody in and sing it. You could do that.
Yes.
I was definitely not in the current.
And you can't name anyone who was passionately opposed to
Yes,
it being
I don't
sung.
remember her name, the woman who was in charge of the proms. That was the point.
Right.
And look, you might think it's trivial, but I can tell you, the moment people heard that a quite woke person in charge of the proms had decided we weren't going to be able to sing Rule Britannia, all hell broke loose. But more
Well, of
importantly,
course it did. That's what I mean by the being primed. Okay.
more importantly for the left and for the wokies, what did it actually achieve? In the end, they do a U-turn, as everybody knew they would. So they don't win. They just have a completely futile war, which is guaranteed to ensure they don't get what they want to get. When was the woke candidate in an election who won anything?
I'm still not entirely sure what you mean by woke, and we can hopefully we can use myself as an example on this. But for me, the fact that there was no audience there simply meant that they were changing the way that the event unfolded. The Times, I think, or the Sunday Times got hold of it, turned it into a story. And the number of stories you see now about Black Lives Matter are responsible for this review, there's no such thing. Can you name someone who is what you could call a member of Black Lives Matter? And yet every story I read about Nelson being reassessed or statues being protected, I just don't know who these people are. And I sit in newsrooms, and I'm sure you still do too, and I hear people desperately ringing around to try to find someone to represent what you describe as an army. If there's so many of them, why are they so hard to find?
I don't think you need to find anybody. When you have to board up Winston Churchill, Gandhi and Mandela statues in Parliament Square.
But they did that during the Countryside Alliance March.
Of course. I'm not, listen.
Are they woke?
The right wing can behave far worse than the left wing.
They're right wing. They're just country people. They're just pointing out when there's a big event. They probably boarded up those statues when you were having your big anti-Iraq war march.
Yes, listen. I am not saying that everyone's not culpable. I'm not saying I'm not culpable or part of this frenzy and noise. But what I am saying is the illiberal liberal element of wokedom has got completely out of hand. You might not accept it, but go out and ask people, are you sick and tired of this stuff? And they'll tell you they are.
Well, of course they will, because so much effort, it's like Brexit, so much effort has been put into telling people that there's an enemy at the gate. No one's bothered to check whether there actually is. So off the top of your head, who has been cancelled in the United Kingdom?
What do you mean, who's been cancelled?
Well, it's a word you use a lot. You say that James O'Brien won't be cancelled because he's got such a big platform.
Well, you have. You're not going to get cancelled. Well,
so who has been?
I can't remember the name of the author who got cancelled by the
You're going to have to do better than that, because you say James O'Brien will not be cancelled, but I know loads of people who have been. So just name a few.
Okay, well, I can think of one immediately, which is a good example. And actually, you ought to be furious about it. And it was the author. I don't know her name.
Well, then it's hardly a massive issue if you can't even remember her name.
It is a massive issue.
Okay. So the author whose name you can't remember, what did she do?
By her publisher, because the woke staff of the publisher, and there are myriad examples in the book like that.
But this will be trans, won't it? It won't be any other issue.
It will be trans.
Yes, because that's the only thing that works.
Because you happen to agree with it.
I don't have a view on trans. I write in my new book about how I can't pick a side.
As I say in the book, you do have a view on trans, and the moment you expressed your view on trans, they tried to cancel you.
No, and let me explain why you got that horribly wrong, if I may. So
I'm looking forward to this.
Well, what I tweeted as you, and I'm very flattered that there's so many pages
dedicated. I was very flattering about you.
You're always very nice. But I mean, two things I'd pick up first. James O'Brien, who a popular and successful radio presenter, that's fairly uncontroversial. It never crosses O'Brien's mind that he might not be right, or that anyone who disagrees with him might not automatically be a vile bigot. How to Be Right, which I don't think you've read, is the polar opposite of that. On every page, I
know what you claim to be.
No. It's my book that you've mentioned. Shall I tell you what's in it?
There's no relation to any of that.
Well, let me tell you what's in my book.
You could be very self-righteous. You
say that according to Twitter, but my book is about how easy it is to persuade good, decent, non-bigoted, intelligent, fully functioning people of things that aren't true. And then I go through 10 different issues, everything from Winterval, which was a myth, right through to the controls we did and didn't have over immigration, to the meaning of political correctness. And on every single page, or certainly after every single transcript, I say, this is a good person. This is not a stupid person. And yet, under your reading, everyone who disagrees with me must automatically be a vile bigot.
Nobody could read your Twitter feed without drawing the hourly conclusion that you think anybody that voted Brexit, it must be a total moron.
No, that's simply not true.
Otherwise,
my best friend voted Brexit. My father-in-law voted Brexit. This is where I'm wasting my breath, because you're saying things that are simply not true to support your thesis. So let's park that and move on to this example that you use.
Once again, you think you're right, and you won't countenance.
No, I think I'm right about who I am, Piers, and what I wrote in my book.
Question who you are, the same way you're questioning who I am.
Okay, well, I'm right about what's in my book that I wrote and that you haven't read.
But on the transgender thing,
why would you even put it in there if you haven't read it?
Before you move on so fast on the transgender thing, explain.
No, I'm not moving on. I'm coming right to it now. That's absolutely where we are. So what I was under.
For cover.
I was under scrutiny or criticism from people who would be described perhaps as anti-trans or TERFs, and they were asking me, I wish I could ask him what it's like to be a woman. So I explained how confusing I find it all. And there's a chapter on this in my book as well, which would have helped you perhaps understand what I was doing on this occasion. And I said, I don't think it's unreasonable to not let human beings with penises into changing rooms, knowing that the response to that, because we've done it on the radio show, is always, well, who's going to check? And that's the point at which I say, actually, I can simultaneously sustain two contradictory positions here, because A, I don't think it's unreasonable to suggest that people with penises shouldn't be allowed into female changing rooms. B, I can't support any form of underpants police or genital examination before you're allowed into a changing room. And my friend Paris Lees, who you cite here as somehow attacking me or turning on me, well, she makes a brilliant point. She says, who's going to check the contents of my pants? So instead of thinking, crikey, that's a really good point, you saw it as evidence of wokeness. So first question would be, who is going to check the evidence of her pants?
Well, these are the questions that have to be asked, aren't they?
Well, and I answer them in my new book. Yeah. You don't in yours. So who should check the contents of her pants?
I don't know is the answer, right? But what I would say...
But you do think that it's reasonable to suggest that people with penises shouldn't be allowed into female-only spaces?
Listen, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm saying when you say there's no such thing as cancel culture, look at the reaction you got.
And I say to you, you can't name anyone, and if you can, it will only be about trans, not about all the other issues, from vegan sausage rolls to Black Lives Matter.
The example I was giving you before you so rudely interrupted me, was the writer who got cancelled by her publisher because she retweeted a support for J.K. Rowling, who had similar views about the transgender issue, and believed women's rights are being damaged by the trans rights lobby. And I have a lot of sympathy with a lot of what she says, not all of it, but most of it. And I do think at the very least, somebody as woke as J.K. Rowling should not end up with a hashtag RIP J.K. Rowling. That is the kind of illiberal fascism, which is the very thing that wokies claim that they detest most in genuine fascists.
But you keep saying wokies, and I keep saying this only works on the trans issue. So give me some examples from other areas. Who's been cancelled? Who's been cancelled
on the trans issue?
I've read your book.
I'll give you an example. Radical feminists who want James Bond to be a woman.
Right. Why do you care?
I care because James Bond's a man.
Did you see Glenda Jackson's King Lear?
Yes.
What did you think of it?
It's got nothing to do with James Bond.
It's got quite a lot to do with gender. It's got quite a lot to do with gender.
I've got no problem with a woman spy being a hero. Here's another example. Altrincham School for Girls.
Yes.
Told all their staff they could no longer use the word girl, and yet the name of the school remains Altrincham School for Girls. Now, what about the girls' right to be called a girl at that school, given 99% of the kids there are girls? Google.
How many of them have you asked?
Let me finish a little. You wanted some examples?
I don't know, I do, but let's examine them one by one. How many of the girls at Altrincham School for Girls have you asked about how they felt about this?
We had a lot of people.
Because it probably came from the pupils.
Contacted from the. Well, hang on. A lot of people from the school contacting us saying it's utterly ridiculous. And what about, they said, why is it that the transgender right, which is just a tiny minority of students,
trans again.
we're able to dictate how everybody got called in the school.
But I'm agreeing with you that when it comes to trans, there is a tension and a confusion and an unresolved animosity between two very, very furiously entrenched camps. But there isn't on anything else. And you've basically written a whole book.
I haven't finished yet.
Oh, sorry.
Google react to radical vegans screaming away by removing the egg from their salad emoji.
So what?
What about my rights as somebody who loves eggs?
Yes.
To have the egg in the emoji. Why does a radical vegan get to have it removed when I, like most people in this country, love eggs.
Yes. Have you found your access to eggs in any way limited?
Only when I click on Google and look at the...
No, your access to actual eggs rather than cartoon representations of them.
My point is the radical divisions of all these things, and there are much more serious...
No, but you can't say the radical divisions of all these things when you've conflated transgender with a cartoon of an egg.
I haven't. I've just told you different examples. You said you're only talking about trans.
Because that's the only thing that works. Nobody is cross about an egg emoji. Nobody's cross about that, and you're not really.
Of course they're cross about it, or he wouldn't have been...
An emoji of an egg?
Of course.
Right.
Yeah, people weren't cross about it.
Do you understand why I said I can't tell how much time you spend with your tongue in your cheek? I mean, hand on heart, you're really cross that Google removed an egg from their salad emoji.
No, hand on heart, on the more serious point.
Yes, as long as it's not trans.
Yes, okay. You can pick any subject you like. Hand on heart, my issue with it all, collectively, is that this kind of nonsense, what it drives is a sense of ongoing, all-encompassing censorship, where companies in particular are now bowing to pressure from the woke brigade to virtue signal their way to a place that I find hellish, where people are being dictated to about every single part of their lives. And most of it is trivial, as you rightly observe, but it's the fact it happens on trivial stuff that A, distracts from the bigger picture, and B, drives people completely nuts and makes them think that they have no ability to have any freedom of speech or expression. And I think that is legitimately a really serious issue.
But you don't think people should be allowed to say it would be great if James Bond was played by a woman? That's freedom of speech.
Not if it happens.
Why not?
Because James Bond's a man.
Yeah, a fictional man.
He's a man. He was
written as a man. Not real.
He's a man.
He's
so
not
you're
real.
happy for James Bond to be a woman, are you?
I hand on heart, I could not give a fig, mate.
Okay, I just...
If it's a good... Do you know what I'd do? I'd go to the cinema and decide whether it was a good film or not.
You have things that you care about. I have things that I care about.
But I don't. This is why I like you so much, because I think you really do care about this, and it is. You must, on some level, realise how ridiculous it is, and that's why I have a problem with your book, because the trans issue is profoundly important, and I write very great length and in great detail about it in both the book I published a couple of years ago that you haven't read, and the book that comes out next week. And there's a huge
about your books. If I did, I'd read them.
There's a huge danger of conflating cartoon eggs with young people who feel they've been born into the wrong body.
No, because you decided that that's the one issue that matters.
No, I gave you a lot of space to list all the great crimes committed by wokies, and you've come up with James Bond and a cartoon egg, mate.
Go through the more serious things in the book.
Well, what are the more serious things?
Well, let's talk about
apart
racism.
From trans.
Let's talk about racism and the reaction to George Floyd's killing, and the ridiculous way it went away from being a battle for racial equality and racial justice into utter ridiculousness about anything that anybody in the world on the woke side decided was racist and had to be cancelled.
For example?
I ended up focusing on Rule Britannia, Faulty Towers, statues were being destroyed all over America, famous presidents, with the most tenuous links in some cases to slavery. Over here, Winston Churchill being boarded up and Mandela being boarded up.
Yeah, but we're back there again. They always board them up.
Got completely crazy because and the damage is done to the actual cause.
I hear you. I don't buy it, but I think you're sincere. I mean, okay. So, final question: can you name any major public figures who think that statues of Winston Churchill should be taken down?
Yes.
Go on.
Interviewed him on the show.
Who?
Kehinde Andrews, the professor for one.
He is the guy that every producer in the country will tell you, and we can't find anybody to pursue this point. That's the person we call. And I did say public figures.
The Winston Churchill statue was defaced. It was
by an idiot student. I sometimes think if you'd been to university, you'd realise that idiot students have been around forever, and giving them this level of profile and importance and treating them as if they're a threat to civilization as we know it is their dream come true, Piers.
There are lots of people who think that Winston Churchill is the problem when it comes to the race debate, to which I say, actually, he got rid of the worst racists ever.
But there aren't, though. There might be some dozy undergraduates who've read the wrong books and haven't actually grown up yet. But my attitude would always be, oh, bless them, they'll grow out of it. Yours is, oh, my God, they're destroying civilization as we know it, and we must stop them now.
You realise that when I wrote the book,
yes,
people like you were the people I really wanted to read it.
Yes.
because I knew you'd react like this.
But I'm not. I'm reacting with
You are,
great
you're reacting to your normal
affection and
childlike-
amusement. No, seriously, I promise you, I'm never going to look at I'm never going to look at a cartoon egg in the same way. I'm not outraged, but just because you use me as an example, I didn't recognise your account, not least because Paris Lees remains a very good friend of mine, and she made an extremely good point about the underpants police. So I couldn't work out whether or not I'm being held up as an example of being woke or a victim of cancel culture.
I think you were an ironic victim of cancel culture, which you don't think exists.
Yes, except on trans issues.
Well, I was giving an example where on trans issues, which is the only issue you seem to care about.
No, well, I care about it more than eggs. Forgive me. Cartoon eggs.
Yeah, but you only care about things that you care about. And
Nonsense. I care about equality and decency and honesty and integrity and accountability.
Your shtick is to be blindly partisan about an issue.
Isn't.
And by the way, you do it very well.
No, but I don't do that at all.
You will never.
Why do you have to do this? There's lots of things you can criticize me for without making stuff up. You've made up stuff in the book. You don't have to make up stuff here.
What stuff have I made up in the book?
I love being wrong. Well, you said that everybody who doesn't agree with me, I consider to be an uneducated bigot, whereas the book you're actually referring to when you say that is full of explanations.
I read your Twitter feed.
Well, my Twitter feed, honestly, mate.
Every day.
Life's too short.
Permanently.
We're not. Do you know what we've done? We're not going to have any time to talk about Trump. So the three areas. On my Twitter feed, the three areas upon which you've historically sought to lock horns with me were the utter, the way that Donald Trump's depravity outside the White House would make it absolutely clear to anybody honest how completely dangerous he would be inside the White House, that the Brexit that people voted for was absolutely impossible to deliver, and that Boris Johnson was supremely unfit for office. What did I get wrong?
Well, you're always right about everything. You know.
No, just on those three issues, which are the only things you've ever tweeted me about.
The thing you got wrong is that you refused to accept the result of the referendum.
No, I didn't. That's not what I asked you. I said that the people weren't going to get the Brexit that they voted for. They're not, are they? Of
course not. But
So you agree with me?
Of course. You know I agree with you about Brexit.
And Trump?
Trump, as you know, I've known him a long time. I see good and bad in him, and I think he may lose the election for all the bad side of him coming to the fore. But I don't see him as bad as you do, but I don't see him as good as he sees himself.
And Boris Johnson's fitness for office?
Boris Johnson's turned out to be an absolute clinker.
And that's what makes debates like this so fascinating. I've watched Piers and James go back and forth plenty of times, and this one followed a familiar pattern. Piers focused on what he sees as a growing culture of self-censorship and political correctness. James kept asking the same question, where's the evidence? And honestly, neither man gave the other much ground. What's interesting is that public opinion is just as divided. Polls over the past few years have consistently shown that many people believe free speech is under pressure, while others think the so-called culture war is being exaggerated by politicians and the media to keep people angry and engaged. So in the end, this wasn't really a debate about one word. It was a debate about how we see society itself. Are these cultural shifts genuine problems, or are they being amplified until they feel bigger than they really are? Now I want to hear from you. Who won this debate? Did Piers make the stronger case, or did James expose the weaknesses in his argument? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.